Okay, well, let's call us to order at 6:37. And looking at our consent agenda, we have our previous minutes and policies. I'm interested in taking a motion.
I can make that motion to accept the agenda.
Okay.
Are we not going to have any discussion about the policy?
Yes. So I think that you were just, there's a policy that I sent you just before this meeting. And I think that I'm hearing people might have been a little surprised to receive it. So that was not the intention. We have been working on the in-district transfer procedure, not policy, but it's procedure. So we're presenting it to you because it's new. It's a part of the work of the merge is to try to figure out how we navigate the ability for kids to be able to attend schools within the district. So what I sent you was the version that was approved at 4:15 this afternoon by the policy committee. So the closure has gotten in the way of our policy work a couple of times now. So we have just finalized this and have navigating trying to figure out two separate pieces. There is the procedure for in-district. So if there was a child whose parents wanted them to attend a school different than the school that they reside in, the town that they reside in, there's a procedure that's outlined in this that would allow them to be able to do so. So I would expect that you would want to have a discussion about this policy. I'm sure there are questions.
Yeah, I want to be the first to admit that I didn't read it. That was about the time I had completely logged off. So I
But I put it up.
Sure.
Would be helpful. Actually, Morgan, you'll have to allow me to.
Let's see if I can do that.
So while he is allowing me to be able to do it, let me just give you kind of a summary. So essentially, the in-district transfer policy permits students to attend an in-district elementary school other than their home school based of residency for the following limitations. So it would be, there would be a 10 student limit inclusive of all the schools, and if more than 10 were to request, hold on, I'm gonna open it up. If more than 10 were to request that, there would be a lottery system that would be established to figure out could transfer. So there's a little clause in here that we designed around child attendance, and then there's in a second that that child would be given priority. So the sibling priority steps is what that is about. There's also the capacity if they don't get into their first school choice, they could apply for a second choice lottery if it becomes available. Only to attend 1 hour for done. So this is not open. It's disclosing that we cannot discriminate on students who wish to transfer in. The next part is just talking about requests for transfer can be denied because we have to take into consideration the optimal class size. I think both in the class that students are leaving and the class that they would potentially be joining. So we reference the FNESU policy on class size, and there's an optimal range for those classes. And our thinking was that students could be accepted if the population of that class falls within the optimal range. If there's a class that's approaching the maximum size, we don't want to let other students in because it could result in us having to hire teachers down the road. Students would have the ability to stay until they're matriculated into the 9th grade. If they wish to return to their home school, there's not going to be an allowance for mid-year kind of flip-flops. So they would just need to notify us the spring prior that they want their home school. Once they're accepted, they don't need to reapply in subsequent years. Transportation is not provided. It is solely the parent's responsibility to provide that transportation. There'd be an application process. Typically, it would be due on April 15th, and then they would be notified by May 1st if they were selected in the lottery. For this year, because of where we are with our timeline, it would be that the application would be due by July 1st, and it would be notified by July 15th. And I already said this part about they'll be expected to stay in that school for the remainder of the year. And then 14 is addressing the students having the ability, if they move to another municipality within the school district, this allows that flexibility for those students to be able to stay within their home school for the remainder of the year. They would not be provided, but the family could choose for them to stay for the remainder of the year. And then if they wanted to remain beyond that, they would have to apply under this procedure. So what questions do you have about this?
Lynn, can you clarify the sibling portion of this? If you could scroll up on your
Yeah.
document there a little bit, or down rather.
So it's under
With
number
the
2.
Right. So if siblings are automatically given preference, is that outside? That can go beyond this 10 student limit, or no?
No. If there was an opening, the sibling would be given priority.
Okay.
Lynn, I know that we talked about this as one of the benefits of having one big school district like we have now, but I wonder, have you heard of any desire for this to happen? Like, it's good to have the policy in play and procedure in place, but what do you suppose the need is?
The need or the interest?
Right. Both.
I mean, I've talked to other superintendents who've been living this longer than we have. And I think that anytime there's a change in your practice, I think that it's a natural reaction to have some reluctance or fear associated with it. And I think, for some of the districts, one in particular, they were thinking there was going to be more of an influx, more people that were wanting to move. And their district that has probably 600 or 700 more than we do, and they only have 7 kids who are exercising this throughout their whole district. So I don't think that because we're not providing transportation, I'm not anticipating that this would be a lot of students who would be moving between schools.
And it would eliminate the need for those traditional ones that we have seen pretty regularly of students who are transferring within the district or want to remain at a school inside our district. Well, I'm sorry, I'm not wording this correctly. I'm thinking back to the young woman from Sheldon who moved to a different town in our SD. We wouldn't have to go through that process as a board anymore. It would already be in place with this policy, right?
Well, in that circumstance, you still would, because if you look at number 14, it's about if a student's family moves to another municipality in the school district. So if it's outside of the school district, it would still have to go before the board. So, but if you had a child who moved from Bakersfield to Sheldon, there would be no question that the student from Bakersfield could finish the year in Bakersfield.
Lynn, can you clarify? I mean, you're saying 10 students, and I know it's hard to predict the various scenarios, and they could look very different from year to year. You've identified that you have numbers for kind of capacity, the kind of ideal student-teacher ratio. I'd love to know what those are, and I think they are grade specific, but I don't know for sure. And then, so if you're saying 10 students, what if you had a really dramatic situation where you had 10 eighth graders wanting to come in, or a disproportionate number wanting to move into one particular grade? Would then capacity limits and student-teacher ratios come into discussion?
Yes. So I'm going to just show you the policy that we're referring to, Mary. And it falls under our class size policy. Let's see if I can quickly put my fingers on it. Class size right there. One. So in that scenario, if you had, say, Berkshire, and you had 10 kids that wanted to move into Berkshire, the way the lottery would work is that when an application is received, we would date and time stamp the application. So we would look at them in order also. So in terms of class size, we've got this right here. So for example, in 3rd through 6th grade, well, we can take, in your example, 8th grade, for example. So the minimum class average for this cluster is 14. The maximum is 25. We feel if it gets too close to 25, we shouldn't allow any others in under this policy, because if we had resident students move in, we'd be worried that we would need to hire an additional teacher. But if the class size was in this optimal range within this cluster, that it would be relatively safe to add students if they were within that range. So this was a lengthy part of the conversation that the principals and the other policy members had, was about how do we define, because we also don't want it to be that we don't anticipate that there's going to be an influx moving in or out. The 10 student limit is definitely something that makes everybody feel better, because we don't know what this is going to be like when you put this policy in play. But I think that the principals definitely felt better knowing that we were really looking in that cluster, like that optimal average range cluster. Does that answer your question, Mary?
Yeah, it does. I mean, you're saying 10 total, obviously not 10 per grade, which would completely
Right.
overwhelm a particular school.
10 total.
Yeah.
Combined for all 4 schools.
But you're going to be mindful of leaving capacity for people who move in and out during the course of the school year, so that there always needs to be room for a resident child that moves in at any point in the school year.
Yes. The reality is most of our classes have space and many of the classes would fall in that optimal range. But there are some classes that are really full. I can think of some examples specifically in Berkshire where they're already over that maximum average per grade cluster, or they're up close to that maximum average. So we would not allow anyone to exercise that transfer into Berkshire at any of those grade levels where they were over that average range.
And do you think that you would be kind of also looking at it from a more kind of nuanced angle as far as that particular class, the particular class makeup, the needs of the students that are already in the class, and the capacity of the teacher in making the decision to allow, more more students to come in?
I think that, oh shoot, I got out of that one and then I lost my, I think that could factor in special circumstances. I think generally when it's within this average range, it is likely not going to be an issue to add an additional student if it's within that average range. What we can't do is set something up so that it is discriminating against the children who are applying. So it can't be that if this child has any sort of special need or disability, we wouldn't accept them. So it makes me a little uncomfortable to say, yes, we would do that. We could look at the classroom, but we wouldn't be looking at whether or not someone applying meets a certain criteria. I don't know if I'm saying that really.
Right. Yeah, no, I understand that. And I certainly would never advocate for discriminating based on, the needs of the student. I'm just thinking also of the needs of the existing class and the capacity of the teacher. I'm just trying to, I'm just sensitive to that component too.
Yeah. Trying to go back to the policy. Yeah, I lost it for a second there.
And it sounds also like, Lynn, like it's very structured as far as the window of time so that these decisions are being made well in advance of the start of the school year. So we really understand kind of what the numbers are, and that, other than a new family moving into town, the transfer component is kind of done during the summertime. It's a known quantity so that it's not disruptive and coming and going in the kind of course of the school year.
Yes. So that it typically will be done in the spring, Mary. So it typically will be applications by April 15th, and then they'll be notified by May 1st. So we'll have plenty of time to plan forward and be really mindful about that. This year is different because of just the circumstance we're in. So our timeline will be later, but still the schools will know by July 15th who those children would be. And it was very important to all of us on the committee that this was not a procedure that we put into place that would allow students and families to kind of ping pong between schools, because that is disruptive to everyone. And it's hard on kids as they're moving between schools. So we wanted this to be a really thoughtful process, and we wanted to be transparent right up front that if you do this and you agree to be transferred to this other school, you're there for the rest of the year. There's not an out where you get to go back to your school that you were previously at. You could tell us that that's what you want to do for the following year, but you're committed for the year.
Yeah.
Is there anybody on the policy committee that wants to weigh in on this? Add anything? Okay.
Oh, Kat, you are muted still. I can see your lips moving though.
Okay, am I here now? Thank you. Yeah, I just have kind of another question, I guess, about the dates, and being that it is a springtime decision, but on that idea, and if the decisions are made in the spring and then you do get an influx of people moving in the summer, could potentially those people moving in the summer bump out kids that were already decided in the spring, because now the class size, is off? Does that make sense, kind of what I'm asking?
It does. I think that we would try not to have it bump out anybody. I think that once we commit to them and they commit to us, we should honor that and figure out what we need to do to navigate the additional students in the classroom. The hope is it wouldn't be families in at one grade level. I know every once in a while there's a real anomaly and that will happen, but typically they're a little more spread out. Any other questions? So I know you had not a lot of time to review this in advance of the meeting, and in order for this to go live, the board has to have 2 looks at this policy. So I would ask you to consider this for your first read tonight. And if you go back home and you look at this and say that I still have questions, you have a second opportunity at your June meeting to bring this back before it's finalized.
And this requires a motion and vote by the board for this to become codified policy, correct? Or
Well, it
procedure?
is actually a procedure. So procedures are not typically board level, but because this is different, this is something that's completely new, and it's as a result of us unifying. I think it makes sense for you guys to act on this procedure.
So really, I guess part of the question is, are we comfortable with tonight being our first reading? Is that what you're asking us, Lynn?
Yes.
Thoughts from the board? I saw a nod out of John. I couldn't see you all at the same time. Is everybody else nodding that they're good with? Oh, there you all are.
Sorry about that. I was hogging the screen.
That's okay. It's okay.
I'm fine with it.
Okay.
I am too.
Miranda, you good with it? Yeah. Okay. Lisa?
Yes, I'm on the policy committee and we really put a lot of work and thought into it, so I'm comfortable with it.
Good. Mary?
Yep.
Okay. And Kat?
Yep.
And Aaron, I think you said yes, right? Okay.
So there is another concept. I'm not going to ask you to approve this one, but I want to just introduce the idea to you. So, oops, Morgan, you gave me the power and then you took it away. So there's another piece of the
You got it back.
what we have talked. I think I have it back. There's another piece of what we've talked about, and that is come as a result of something that we have been struggling with since probably the beginning of time within the supervisory union. We have these weird little circumstances where we have kids who live way out away from, for example, we have kids that live at the top of Enosburg Mountain that have to come down into Montgomery, and then they have to hop on an Enosburg bus and drive through Berkshire to get to their school in Enosburg. So in reality, they're only a few miles away, maybe 4 miles away from the Montgomery school, but they've got to drive through Montgomery and Berkshire to get to their school of residence. We also have some situations where we have some kids in Montgomery that I think there's some Bakersfield, Enosburg situations like that. I couldn't tell you the roads, but there are kids at the top of Black Falls in Montgomery that are actually legally resident. So they would have to come down in to Montgomery, hop a bus to go to Richford. So we've been trying to navigate, is there a way that we could do an inter-district transfer procedure for those kids? So we have come up with this language, and I'm not, like I said, going to ask you to approve this because I have it in front of the attorney that we work with right now. So I'll be asking you in June to weigh in on this one. So what this is essentially saying is that if there are kids that are within the NMV USD and the ER USD within Franklin Northeast, we shall permit those students to attend an inter-district elementary school other than the residency-based homeschool based on the following. Non-easy language to come up with. Students who are geographically closer by town or state highway to another school and have to drive through another town to get to their school of residence. They're eligible to make the request to the superintendent to be allowed to attend a school outside of their school of residency within FNESU. Like the other procedure, the transportation would be up to the families. So do you have any general comment?
Lynn, I would say on that, you know, I know the situation on the Black Falls Road. You may want to consider, if we moved forward with this, because language around the transportation specific, because the Montgomery bus comes up this road to get everyone else's kids. Kate is the person you're talking about. I can't remember her partner's name. He has a young daughter, and then they have a little more toddler age child together. They're about a half, maybe 3/4 of a mile up the road from me, but they are technically in Richford.
Right.
But the bus, I mean, they live on the Black Falls Road. It's a dead end road. It seems as though they could get on the Montgomery bus.
There is a clause in this that unless a bus to the sending school is available.
Okay.
And it's just that the bus routes change frequently, Mary, so we don't want to guarantee somebody that there's going to be a bus.
It might mean that they have to drive to where the bus goes. If they're really, like, for example, in Bakersfield, way up at the top of Belvedere Mountain.
Right. Well, that would mean that you're no longer busing the Montgomery kids on the Black Falls Road, though.
No, you're already, that example, there would be no issue for that student. That student would fit on a bus route. But there may be some, we just wanted to keep that language in there because there may be, some of these are really kind of remote places, and we did not want to guarantee, not that transportation is guaranteed anyway, but we wanted to make sure that that was evident, that if there wasn't a route, that they may have to, and they might even just need to meet the bus wherever the nearest pickup is.
Right. Yeah, that's wise. I mean, in this case, the youngest child in this particular family would not theoretically attend Montgomery until I think every other child on the road is actually probably out of Montgomery. So there actually could be a time at which that Montgomery bus is not specifically coming up the Black Falls Road anymore because all the kids have aged out of the K-8. Other than the Richford family.
Right. So what is your thinking just behind the philosophy of this?
I think it makes good sense.
Do you mind if I ask a question? The Black Falls, what if that student was going to Richford? Would Richford not be providing any transportation? I mean, the Montgomery buses for the West Hill, Enosburg Mountain Road area and the Black Falls. I mean, the Montgomery buses go up there right now. And like the Enosburg Mountain kids get on a Montgomery bus, come down, meet the Enosburg bus. So what if there were no Montgomery kids and that kid was going, that one girl way at the end was still attending Richford? Would she not be provided transportation to Richford?
So that would be between the Richford, the UUSD, and the bus company would have to figure out what they were going to do in that circumstance. Okay. But this is exactly what we're talking about. So Mary, let's use that scenario. If Montgomery no longer has to send a bus up Black Falls because there are no Montgomery students. So the responsibility for transportation would fall to Richford. And would Richford send a bus all the way from Richford to the top of Black Falls to get the child? So that this is the scenario. We've had dozens of these scenarios over the years, and this procedure is, the intention behind it is to make it, I think kids in those circumstances identify with the community that they live closest to, but unfortunately they have to attend school, and that's where they make their friends and relationships. in a community that's really feels like a couple of towns over in some circumstances.
I'm curious, Lynn, how this intra-district or inter-district would intersect with the other policy, the transfer policy, as far as numbers go. So if we've already said, okay, 10 students kind of coming in feels like the capacity when we look at the ideal student-teacher ratios, then is this on top of the 10?
Yes.
And how many families and kids does this kind of cover?
I would be really surprised if the kids who already have established school situations jump out of those situations and then want to go to another school. I mean, it might happen. We probably have, I don't know, I think we said earlier 6 or 8 families. I don't know how many kids are associated with them, but I think that as kids are school age and they're making the decision about, or it's time for them to go to school, I think you're more likely to capture them at that point. I think that this would be spread out. The examples that we've come up with involve different schools, so I don't think that there would be an influx necessarily into any one school. I think that the examples for Montgomery in particular involve one child that we know of at this point.
And who's paying for the student? If their property taxes, go to the town in which their home is. So in the case of Kate on my road, she pays property taxes to Richford, not Montgomery. And I know, Charlie and Matt Crowley, who are right up the Longley Bridge Road, they can spit into Montgomery, but they're in Enosburg. And Annie goes to Enosburg Elementary and they pay taxes to Enosburg. So how is since we still have separate budgets, it's not as easy as movement within NMVU when we have a unified budget.
So there are 2 factors that I have sought counsel about, and that is one of them. The way it works at the high school level for high school choice is if there's a child from one town, say Highgate, and they want to go to Enosburg, they can apply for high school choice, universal high school choice through the state of Vermont. And Enosburg takes on the child, but Highgate would count that child, so they get the revenue associated with that child. So it is, I'm sure it was done for a reason, which I don't completely understand, because the town who's educating the child doesn't get the revenue for educating the child. So you get the kiddo and you get the expenses, but you don't get the money. So that's happening broadly throughout the state with a high school choice, and this would replicate that, I think. But this is the question that one of the questions that I've pushed to the legal counsel.
Well, yeah, that's a tricky scenario. I mean, yeah, I don't know. I don't really understand how then, I mean, if it's a small number of kids, I suppose, but it could work. But how does that not start to strain our budget if we have the expense of educating the child, but we have none of the tax revenue that follows that child?
The reality is the child is not likely to be, it's unlikely that you're going to have to hire additional staffing because of that child coming in. There could be additional expenditures in there, but it is not like the full tuition rate, the per pupil tuition rate that you set each year that would actually cost you if you're adding another child in there. There is, we also could look at this and put the clause about if there is space in those classes as well. This one, we haven't spent as much time on this one, so we don't feel as sure, but I really just wanted to take a temperature and see what the board was thinking about the idea behind this.
The other piece, in answer to your question, Mary, is that if we are allowed to count that kid as an NMV student in terms of enrollment, that will increase your equalized pupil numbers, which will drive down your tax rate. So the kid is still in your budget, but as long as you're counting them, you're getting the tax benefit from having them in there.
Thanks. Okay.
I really like this policy, Lynn. We've talked about this, it feels like, for years and years. I mean, especially when we were talking about Act 46. So I think that it's time to work on this and get something solid in place that we can use for our students.
Okay. I just wanted to take a temperature here. So I think I have what I need from this. Do you wanna
The
go back
financial
to
piece concerns me. So I'll be curious to hear what you hear from your legal counsel. There's never a guarantee that a child isn't going to have extraordinary needs that need to be met, because that's our obligation in the public school system. And so I'm just have that question about then what, the costs that come if there's no tax revenue because they're not a resident in the district.
It's exactly the question that we have out there, Mary. You've tuned right into it.
And, it's it's interesting because the folks on my road actually just bought a huge parcel of land before my place so in order to have property in Montgomery. So it's somewhat moot for them in particular, they don't have a house built on the land, but they just bought I think 126 acres that's fully in Montgomery, also on the Black Falls Road, just a little bit before my property.
I'm not sure that makes it moot, though. It has to do with where you actually reside. And if they're residing, their homestead is in Richford, even if they own land in Montgomery, that doesn't make them a Montgomery resident.
Well, not yet. I think they are anticipating building a structure and kind
Okay,
of moving down there. Between how remote it is, difficult to plow. They have this horrific driveway. There's a lot of benefits to being in the tamer part of the Black Falls Road, in addition to it being technically in Montgomery and not Richford. But anyway.
Okay. Jean Marie, do you want to go back to your consent agenda? You're muted.
Sorry. I'm looking at the time and realizing it's 7:15 and we haven't gotten very far. But I think we've gotten through all the policies. I was trying to scroll through my agenda and notes here. What about the minutes? Anybody have any comments or concerns about the minutes in there? Okay. So by roll, can we vote on the consent agenda? Aaron, you're closest to me on the screen, so I'm going to ask you to start, and then if everyone would just go through, please.
Yes.
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 Yes, I don't know where I am on your screen, Jean Marie, because ours aren't the same.
No, that's okay, as long as we all get through here. Okay, next up. Sorry, guys. I think our next topic is visitors, and I feel like I saw some on our participants list. Do we have any visitors with us this evening?
We have only one, and she said before you hopped on that she's just here to observe.
Okay, great. Then I think, hold on, sorry. Lynn, I think you are up next.
Okay, so first up on my agenda is just the COVID-19. So, our teachers and staff and administrators continue to work really hard to help our students and families navigate this continuation of learning period. I think that they have certainly identified some barriers. I think everybody involved in this has identified some barriers, and people are really doing an outstanding job of figuring out how to put the resources that we have available to us kind of all in on this effort. And I think that, we've been able to accomplish some pretty phenomenal things without any lead time, being able to prepare to do something like this. So I continue to be just really proud of everyone within the organization. I think that, we're shifting gears a little bit now where, it doesn't quite feel like everyone's pants are on fire. Every morning when we wake up, we've gotten a little bit more used to this new reality, and there's a little bit of, not that it is easy, but there seems to be a little more space to be thinking forward and planning forward at this point. For a while, that was certainly not the case. So there are several things that we're tuned into right now. Friday is kind of an important day for us. We're expecting guidance from Secretary French about what the end of the year will look like for us. So what that means we are allowed to do in terms of graduation celebrations. I think that primarily he'll be focusing in on high schools, but we'll be looking at that guidance to see if there's a way that we can celebrate our 8th grade students as they end their elementary years in each of our 4 schools. So we're going to be looking for that on Friday, and I will communicate that out to all of you after we receive that. So in terms of financial implications for COVID-19, this is going to have a tremendous impact on us in the world of education, because a lot of the education funding at the state level comes from those consumption taxes like sales and use and rooms and meals, and also from the state law orders. People are not spending a lot of money because they can't really leave home. So that revenue is significantly decreased. So we have some anticipation of, as a state, a deficit for this fiscal year. The reality that is most grim, though, is next year's financial outlook. So we're anticipating that there's going to be a substantial deficit in the $130 million range in the state education fund. So several of the board chairs and Morgan and I sat in on a meeting, I think it was on Monday, with the Joint Fiscal Office, and they have done that before. That isn't our first meeting with them, and they've been providing updates. The one thing I can say from that meeting is I felt a little more reassured that some of the solutions that the state leaders were considering were more decisions and solutions to come at the state level. So the worry would be if we had a deficit that significant, the impact it would have on all of our local taxpayers and on our schools. So I think that, some of the solutions that we heard had to do with the state potentially borrowing in order to be able to kind of spread that deficit out over many years. So it would be felt in a much smaller way by our taxpayers. Welch's office there, and he was talking of exact funding federal, it's going to be state. And internet out, you see? Can you hear me?
I'm afraid we may have lost her, Morgan.
So I'll jump on while she yells at her kids and tells them to get off the Wi-Fi. There was a Representative Welsh had a staffer on the call as well, and they're certainly aware of the situation there, both in terms of the amount of money that's going to be coming down to the state, as well as the flexibility that we would need in our sort of unique way that we fund education in Vermont in order to use some of that money specifically for covering some of these revenue losses this year and into the future. And I think Lynn's back on, so I'll let her jump back in.
Morgan said exactly what I was planning to say. Somehow I knew he would. And yes, I did go yell at my children to tell them to get off the Wi-Fi. So with that reality, I think it's important for you to know that I know you're receiving information from the Vermont School Boards Association as board members, and I'm sure you're aware of this, but I think it's just important for us to talk about it because of the implications for us moving forward. We have to be really strategic and thoughtful about all the financial decisions we're making to close out this year and to go into next year. So it's certainly something I'm looking at my principals here on this call. They've been hearing this from me and from Morgan for quite some time. And I am pushing them to think really strategically about spending and about planning forward as well. So that being said, before I shift gears a little bit, are there any questions about the Joint Fiscal Office report, or is there anything that Mary or Jean Marie want to add in from their perspective?
I will say I've actually been somewhat surprised at the lack of communication from the VSBA. I mean, unless I'm just not getting the emails, I have not. I mean, you know, I was on the webinar, both of them now, and it is remarkable, the financial picture, the disintegration of the financial picture from the first webinar, which was, I don't know what, 5 weeks ago, to the one on Monday. You know, it is a remarkable kind of deficit facing the kind of education fund right now. But I'm not hearing much from the VSBN, and I'm not sure why they're not being more communicative to school boards. I don't know if anyone else has been getting emails, but I've not. Nothing that's really like outlining the kind of current state of play with regard to the deficits and the kind of lack of revenue. And I think that lack of revenue is going to continue because it's not just that people aren't going out, it's that so many people are unemployed and aren't spending money beyond, you know, basic necessities like, you know, food, mortgage, keeping your lights on. So I think that that's going to kind of persist for a while, even once social distancing is kind of mellowing out and businesses are reopening. I still think people won't be generating a lot of revenue for the state for a while because people feel really financially vulnerable right now.
So I think Mary said it right. And the VSBA really has only sent us like a quarterly newsletter. Since Nicole Mace left, things have really changed there, I feel. We don't get the kind of communications when things are happening that we used to. So don't assume that we know, that school board members know through the VSBA really what's happening.
So I will continue to send those things your way. I was making assumptions that you were getting those through the VSBA. So Morgan and I will make a concerted effort to make sure that we're sending you those things that are most relevant for board members. So that being said, you had approved in your budget the hiring of a facilities director for the NMV schools. And I wanted to just bring that back to you because we're in the time of the year where we're readying to look at candidates and begin a hiring process. However, I'm not certain that given the financial climate, this is the right time for us to shift and add this position in. But it's one of those things that I can see the pro and the con to doing it now versus later. It's an expenditure that, we could save that money, but at the same time, we have a construction project going on in Sheldon, and that would certainly be a valuable person to have on board. I know Morgan's going to talk to you about that a little later in his section, but I just want to hear from the board. Are you thinking that it would be wise to not fill that, to fill that position?
I mean, I feel like I want to cry my eyes out because I really was such a big proponent of that position, but I feel exactly the same way you do, Lynn. Like, I feel like we are in a bad time and it's probably not going to get any better, but I said to one of these folks at some point, I figured this facilities position was already gone. So I want it really, really bad. I see so much value in it, but I agree. The finances, the way they are, concern me.
So if we do pause on this, I just hope that the board would consider bringing this back in a future budget. So I think that you're all committed, and I think the taxpayers who heard the presentation about this at town meeting definitely understood, and the majority of them were very supportive of this. I believe that the responsible thing to do right now is to just pause and come back to this if we can afford it in next year's budget.
I'm just wondering, like, what just concerns me that we had that support, and now, and I totally understand, and I'm right there with you. With times probably isn't the best time to be hiring something like this, but I'm wondering if we could just spend a minute to think about, we pushed they're going to bring savings for us, and I know that the salary is an expense that we're a little nervous about right now, but does that outweigh the savings that we were going to be looking for and looking at?
I think from my standpoint, when I was thinking about savings, I was definitely thinking about savings over time. I think that the person could save you money this year for sure. I'm not sure they could save you, what their salary and benefits would cost you. I think over time, you definitely would get that money back. It's just about whether or not you can invest in that model or that shift right now.
I would just add that this position is still going to be in your budget for next year. So that money is there. It's really more about pushing off that hiring decision. So if we do get into the winter months and we've got some good news in terms of the budgets that are going to be taken to voters in FY22, that's something that we can ramp back up at that time.
I hadn't even thought about that, Morgan. It's a good point.
Yeah, that's a great little bright spot. I had a vision, and that's a great idea.
Is that Jean Marie or is that me?
That's Jean Marie.
Okay.
So Morgan, just to clarify, you're saying that if things are still pretty dire by winter, and I'm of the mind that we should wait. I feel as though it's not prudent, especially since we're trying to be so thoughtful about, our expenses and costs right now in all sorts of arenas. If we waited, if we don't hire, and come winter, we get some sort of kind of a more positive kind of forecast for the FY21, 22 heading into 22 financial picture. But if it's still as dire, then what you're saying is that money that we didn't spend, that we had budgeted for could potentially help offset some of our other costs if things are still in bad shape, eh?
Yeah, so if you don't spend that money starting in July, that money is available for next year if the state does figure out a way to cut the revenue they send your way, or we see increased expenses because of the COVID crisis lingering on, or what have you. You can choose to fill that position at any point during the next school year. And I think the next real decision point for you folks, if you don't hire them now, is that when we sit down in November, we're going to be working on the FY22 budget, and we need to make the decision if we're going to leave that position in there for FY22, even if we haven't filled it yet.
Jean Marie, are you back with us?
Who knows?
You are, you're there. Okay, so I gave you a list of personnel categories in your board notes. I've added to it a little bit since we spoke, so I'm just going to go over those quickly. There are some pieces that you're going to need to act on and some you will not. So the first is under resignations, and I'm going to ask you to act on these. So this is to accept resignations from departing teachers. And I can do this if you want. You can do, I think it would take a lot of time to do it teacher by teacher. So maybe you just want to do it. I'll name all of them and maybe you want to accept them as a group. Jean Marie, are you okay with that? You're muted.
Yep, that's fine by me.
Okay. So the resignations in Bakersfield are Steph B. Land and Emma Stevens. In Berkshire, it's Logan Stevens, Alex Eskra St. Louis, Tess Littledale, and Kylie Bryce. In Sheldon, it's Yeshua Pastina, Jessica Borbo, and Jenny Lesperance.
Would somebody like to make that motion?
I'll make that motion to accept those resignations.
Okay. Thank you, Mary. You want me to call you? Is it easier for you all to do if I call your name? Okay. Erin?
Yes.
Emily?
Yes.
Mary?
Yes.
Catherine?
Yes.
Miranda?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
And Lisa?
Yes.
Okay.
So principals, do you want me to do the hiring as a group, or did you want to do them in each of your individual schools? Do you want me to just do it as a group?
Yes. Please.
So in Bakersfield, Rhoda, you and I did not touch base today. Are you good with science and PE?
Yes, I'm good.
So new hires for Bakersfield, they have Charlotte Farrell for guidance, Caleb Shaw for middle school science, Kayla Wood for PE. In Berkshire, for elementary, we have Megan Reed, Amanda LaFave. For 5-6 ELA, we have Lauren, I don't know how to say this one, Giampietro.
Yeah, Giampietro is what we're going with at the moment.
And then for 7-8 ELA, we have Andre Morin in Montgomery. For math intervention, we have Brittany Mailhot. And for middle school math, we have Jacob Hartman. In Sheldon, for elementary, we have Monica Wilkes and Lindsay Lesage. And in the library, we have Molly Hazelton.
I feel like that was a lot of names. Are there still open positions, Lynn, or did we fill all the holes?
I'm going to give you open positions in just a second. We still have a few more.
Okay.
I just had a quick question on the Bakersfield PE. Is that a 0.5 or a full-time?
You had not reduced that. That's still full-time.
Full time.
Okay.
Okay, shall we vote again? Aaron, I'll start with you.
Well, we need to make a
Oh,
motion.
yes, sorry. Right.
I'll make the
listen.
motion. I'll make the motion to approve the new hires throughout those schools.
Thank you, Mary. Listen, I warned you that I've been on this stupid computer since 6:30 this morning. My brain is done already. Okay, Aaron,
Yes.
Emily,
Yes.
Miranda,
Yes.
Mary,
Yes.
Kat,
Yes.
Lisa,
Yes.
and John.
Yes.
Great, thank you all.
So the, just informational, the extensions that I sent your way, those have not changed. We still have 6 teachers who have asked for extensions. So they have until May 15th to sign their contract. So once we get beyond May 15th, we know exactly who we have for our staff. In terms of remaining open positions, principals, I went over this with Jamie, so if I have anything not quite right, please jump in. In Bakersfield, they are looking for 1 elementary teacher, part-time math intervention, and they do have an anticipated school nurse opening that may or may not be a real opening. Berkshire has a half-time LPN, and they're looking for a Lease coordinator. Montgomery's positions are filled. Sheldon is looking for 2 elementary teachers and a technology integrationist. And those are our remaining positions. Did I miss anything? Okay. Any questions on any of that under personnel, or are we good to go? Okay, so I have nothing under student at this time. The next thing is ratification of the teacher collective bargaining agreement. So I believe it was Morgan that mailed that out to you. You have some members of your board, Jean Marie and Mary, who were on that bargaining team. We worked with the teachers bargaining team for, we met for 2 sessions. The last one was quite a marathon. I think we were approaching the 5-hour mark before that one was over, but we were able to come to an agreement at the end. So are there any questions on the bargaining agreement that was sent out? So if there are no questions, Jean Marie, I would ask for a motion from the board to ratify and authorize you to sign the master, or to sign that collective bargaining agreement away from the table.
Okay.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Lisa. Shall we vote? Aaron,
Yes.
Emily,
Yes.
Mary,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Kat,
Yes.
and Lisa.
Yes.
Thank you all.
The last thing I have is school calendar. So I asked Doreen to send those to you today to take a look at. So each of our 4 communities we have a common calendar, but their local in-service days are different. So each school ends up with their own master calendar. So I'm just going to go over some changes to the master part of the calendar. So this year in particular, Labor Day falls in kind of a funny place. For as long as I can remember, we've had this 3 days the first week of school, a 4-day week because of Labor Day, and then our first 5-day week doesn't happen until the 3rd week. Labor Day falls pretty late this year, so we actually go 3 days, 5 days, then 4 days. So earlier this year, the SU board approved allowing early release days for us to have some additional professional learning time for our teachers. So you'll see those on October 2nd and October 5th. On those early release days, our LEAPS staff will be available to support kids who choose to stay at school after the dismissal period at noon or after their lunch period. We kept the Thanksgiving break the way it was in this year's calendar. We have 2 student days at the beginning of that week that seem to work pretty well. The holiday week, This year in December, before that winter break, there were 2 days that could have been student days. Those are some of the least productive days of the year, ramping up to that holiday break. So the administrators, the leadership team looked at that, and we came up with an idea this year to make that Monday an SU in-service day and the Tuesday a local in-service day. So the kids get the full 2 weeks in December and January. And other than that, the calendar is pretty standard. It is like the calendars we have done in the past. Any questions on the calendars?
My only question, Lynn, is just around a little bit of concern of if we will get to open our doors on the date that we set now.
So that guidance is also guidance that's coming. I have heard lots of different potential scenarios for what next year could look like, but certainly nothing concrete enough for me to want to say in an open public meeting. I think that it would cause rumors, and there's just no guidance yet, so I can't say.
I guess that's my thing. Like, should we be approving this now, or should we be, I mean, I know we did this already at the SU meeting, but I'm just thinking, like, should we approve it now, or should we have waited until after this guidance?
The guidance the guidance on Friday is going to be end of year. It's not going to be next year.
Okay,
So
gotcha.
I think our guidance for the start of next year, it might be July before we hear what that is going to be.
Yeah.
So I think that I would be surprised if it changes our calendar dramatically. But I think the reality, I think I can safely say this, is the reality is that school is not going to look like traditional school for quite some time. I think the reality is until there is some sort of a treatment for COVID-19, I think that we're likely going to have some model that might include online learning. There might be some in person, there might be some online learning. We just don't know yet, but we think that the vaccination, the timing of the vaccination is going to be pretty critical.
And stemming off of Jean Marie, I mean, is there potential that they could be ending this school year early, as other states have done?
I don't know that one. We won't know that part until Friday.
Because, yeah, I kind of wondered if that did happen, then would that also further impact our calendar year, for the coming year?
I think that, one of the things that we are bound by is the master agreement, and we have a fixed number of work days for our teachers. So I think that if there are going to be adjustments to the calendar, I'm not quite sure how that would work with collective bargaining agreements already in place. So I'm just not sure. I think that would be a pretty big shift if they adjusted the calendar dramatically. That might take legislative action to be able to do that.
Lynn, I'm just wondering if you were thinking about when you publish this for families, if there would be like a little stipulation saying that there might possibly be some changes based on things that are happening over the summer.
I mean, I potentially could do that. I'm not convinced that the calendar itself would change. I think that the structure and the model of the learning might be what is most impacted by the guidance, but I really don't know. I think that's premature. I think that for right now, I could make it really transparent that this is the time of the year that we typically approve school calendars, and we're doing that as if it were going to be business as usual next year. I just wouldn't want to say anything to imply that I have some sort of inside knowledge about what that might be, because we don't at this time.
I feel like you do a really nice job communicating those things and making those clear with families. So I think my wording wasn't that great, but the way you just said it was perfect. So.
I will add that to my next to communicate to families list. All right. So did you approve it?
No, we need to make a motion on that. Does somebody want to make a motion regarding the calendars?
Lisa,
Okay, thank you, Lisa. Now we shall vote. Aaron,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Emily,
Yes.
Mary,
Yes.
Kat,
Yes.
Lisa,
yes.
and Miranda.
Yes.
Thank you.
That's all I have for you. There's an error I've just noticed on your agenda.
I was just going to ask, do we have a special visitor?
You do not. That is supposed to be on the UUSD agenda. So please
Okay.
disregard that.
Okay,
You just
thank
found 15 minutes in this agenda.
you. Okay, so the principal reports. Questions for any of our principals, folks?
I should probably tell you a little bit of what's going on with our boiler, because there are some notes on there about the boiler. And what I wanted to let you know is that when Fred's came to work on it, they found more issues. So we're basically in the position where we need to order a whole new boiler. So Morgan and I have talked about that. It can come out of the reserves. They've given me a quote of $20,000. And that's with some other work that they've been working on as well. That was part of the original quote. But I wanted to let you all know that so that it's not what's written in that current report.
Okay, that is just great news, Rhoda. Thanks.
You're welcome.
And with a figure like that, Morgan, do we have to solicit some additional quotes
Bids.
for that?
Yeah.
We don't, because it's an emergency situation. So we got the quote from Fred's and, tried to look at it and figured that we would not see any quotes significantly lower than that. And they've also already started a bunch of the work. And then the one piece that I would add that Rhoda didn't mention is that when they found the crack in the boiler, they gave her a quote for fixing it as opposed to replacing it as well. And I think that was $17,000.
Yes.
So it was sort of a no-brainer to get a new one put in there.
Hey, Morgan, can you remind me from the merge, I feel like there was some stipulation that each individual district kind of maintained a separate, like brought to the table and maintained their own reserve funds.
Correct. So Montgomery, Bakersfield, and Berkshire each had a capital reserve fund prior to the merge. And so those were brought over and are kept separate. And so the funds for this boiler replacement will come out of the funds that are specifically tied to the Bakersfield Elementary School.
And there's enough in there to cover the cost of the new boiler.
As long as Rhoda stops finding stuff.
Okay.
There wouldn't have been if I'd had my way and got the driveway paved before the merge, but I guess it's a good thing now.
I was thinking that same thing. I was like, oh, now we can't do the driveway.
Other comments or from our principals or questions from the board for the principals?
I just want to take this opportunity to thank the principals because, we do teacher appreciation, staff appreciation, but you all have done such a great job during this crisis, holding everything together, propping up everybody's morale. So I just want to thank you for all your hard work.
I echo that, Lisa. Thank you for saying that. My principals, I owe an extreme apology to. I sent them one on Friday night because we celebrated our lunch heroes on Friday. And about 8 o'clock Friday night, I saw something on Facebook and I thought, that can't be right. I surely would have known that. Friday was National Principal Day. and we did not know that. So we do very much appreciate our principals. We just forgot to say it on Friday.
But we will mark our calendars. Is it the same day every year? It could be like Christmas from now on.
Apparently, May 1st.
Oh, okay. Thank you all. Go ahead, Mary.
I echo what Lisa said, and I'm really grateful to everyone who's helping kind of facilitate this process. It's just extraordinary, the collective effort. And I was just curious, I'd love to hear from principals, like how you're finding your people are doing, teachers and staff, and like as far as kind of morale and, you know, managing the complexities of a whole new platform of learning and teaching, and just curious how are people doing, and is everyone holding up okay?
I'll go. I think there's ups and downs. There's days when people are feeling pretty good but they're zooming right along, and there's other days when people are kind of stressed. But I think everyone's doing a really good job, and there's my cat behind me on the shelf. But anyway, today was a really good day. We did a parade through Bakersfield to say that we missed our kids, and it was a really positive, wonderful experience. So I think things are good.
I think teachers feel really supported by what we've been doing as an SU, and I think our collective vision about what we've asked teachers to do and what we're expecting from parents has been really reasonable, and teachers feel really understood and heard with that. At the same time, I think they're still struggling with that piece of recognizing that this learning is not even close to ideal, and worrying about the long-term ramifications and impacts around that, and then the challenges that they face with caring so much for these kids and preparing so much for these kids, but then having the distance barrier exist and trying to work with parents, but noticing how hard it is for parents to do all these different things. And I think the most powerful experience some of our teachers have had is some of our teachers are also parents of some of our kids, and they've noticed how hard it is even for somebody with all of that skill and all that capacity and all that passion to still support a kid. So what must it look like in all the different kind of homes? And I think that's the place where I think there's a lot of sadness and fear. I think everyone's plugging away with a lot of positive energy, but it's still that piece of like really feeling like we're not doing our best for kids, and how much that worries us in the long term, especially for our kids who we know need a lot of support.
You're muted, Sandy.
There. I would like to say that I'm amazed at how they grabbed a hold of this technology so quickly and just ran with it, because I'm on those Google Classrooms looking at how, what they've got set up, especially middle school, and all the links and all this and all that. And it's just, that's kind of beyond me. So really impressed with that all across the board. But I think the hardest thing for the teachers is they're so used to holding the kids accountable for the work that they owe, and motivating the kids to do the work and so forth. And it's just not as easy this way. And so they're having a hard time relaxing a little bit about it, because they just want to keep those expectations up there. So I feel like I have to talk the teachers, down a little bit every once in a while, because they are just so worried about things. So that's the tough part.
I don't think that there's anything very new that I could add to this. I think that teachers have been pretty amazing. They are worried about kids. They're worried about next year, thinking about when we get back together, just kids that they haven't seen for a long time. But they are doing remarkable things. And today we did an IEP meeting where two of our staff members met on the lawn, and they were distanced from the family. And we had a computer because there was a computer issue at the home. I mean, it was insane, and it all worked out. And I mean, it was like, I don't know. The rest of us were just sitting here going, who would have ever thought, right? Like, but the two staff members that went there that, were on the lawn, I mean, just, if people were driving by, they must have, kind of wondered what was going on. And they're, they're sad. I was checking in on a first-year teacher, and she, teared up, and she said, I'm not an online teacher. Like, I didn't sign up to be an online teacher. And, she has little ones, she has first graders, and she's just, sad that she can't see them as much as she would like to. But they're all online. They're all meeting with kids. They're all, doing the very best they can, and thinking that that's not enough.
Thank you all so much. It is an amazingly strange time, and I think that we're going to come out of this so much more resilient. And there are so many dark spots in this, but I also think, man, we've pushed the limits and realizing things that we can do that we never dreamed we'd be able to do. So there's goodness that's coming out of this. It's hard to see it some days, but I just appreciate that feedback. It was good to hear. Okay, Morgan, I think the floor is yours now.
Sorry, I forgot to check in with one thing. Lynn had asked me to hold off on the hiring process with the 0.5 LPN until we met today, and she wanted to talk to us about future positions. So I just wanted to check in on where we stood with that process now.
Thank you for that reminder, Lenny. I just wanted to confirm with the board that was an addition in your budget. Are you still wanting to move forward with hiring for that?
Do you feel, I mean, I know we went through a lot of kind of phases around this nursing discussion. Do you still feel, Lenny and Lynn, as though it's a significant kind of gap in your staffing and a need on the ground in the school?
Yeah, I know the worry based on that whole budget conversation is, in the current climate we have, not wanting to increase budgets or spend money that we may not have 2 years from now or a year from now. But as far as a need, I think it's still an essential need. We end up having we don't have the right professional staff to provide the professional care, and it's a safety issue not having that nurse there, along with the way that it impacts the overall office functionality, having that personnel there at all times. And I know that was one of the big things that Rachel talked about. Obviously, it's not ideal to even have a part-time person or two different people working, because there's obviously the risk or that challenge of making sure communication flows. But she was constantly dealing with that struggle of not being there when certain crises may or may not arise, and not being able to be fully informed. And it was really important to have a professional staff there at all times to deal with those issues.
I think given the size of Berkshire and the needs that are identified, I think it makes sense. My one reservation is just not knowing what it's going to look like in the fall for right now. So I'm wondering if it makes sense to say, yes, move forward if we're shifting into in-person learning. But if we're going into another several months of not being in person, is it the right time to add in that half-time LPN right now? Or should we wait for the fall guidance that might be coming in another month or two?
I think if we can wait, that's the perfect solution, Lynn, because that was my concern, is that we're going to get somebody on board, and then if we are not in person, we have no need for that person. So definitely, I think we should wait for the onboard guidance. on whether we're in person or not.
I would agree with Lisa. I just, my only thought is like how difficult is it to hire? Because I think that if we go in person, you're going to want that person there right away with some of the guidelines that we may have to be dealing with when kids walk into the building.
So I had my finger on the pulse of nursing staff prior to this, and it was really tough. Now there are a lot of laid off, furloughed nurses floating around. And being that it's an LPN and not an RN, I think we might have a better chance of finding somebody. And Jean Marie, I don't know how you're feeling from your perspective about availability of nursing staff versus jobs that are out there at in the current climate.
No, that's exactly the same thing I'm hearing. And I actually was checking in with Leanne Trombley today regarding open positions at Notch, and she's like, yeah, hiring freeze, furloughs and layoffs. It seems to be standard protocol sort of across the globe right now. So I agree 100% with what you've said, Lisa. Before I would have said, oh, this will be a nightmare to fill, but I think now it may be significantly easier. So are you comfortable with that, Lenny?
Yeah, that makes sense. I just wanted to see so we're thinking wait until we have 2 applicants that applied back on April 23rd. We haven't done anything with them yet. I'm wondering if, I guess the piece of me is wondering if I should contact them, let them know like we're waiting on our process, or just leave them hanging there with their open application having not been filled or not responded.
I think it is respectful to reach out and just say, we're still very interested in you. Our process is a little bit delayed because we don't know what fall is going to look like. So if it just be honest with them about if it's not in person in the fall, we're likely not going to fill right away. We'll be filling when we're ready to move back into in person.
Okay.
Okay. Anything else from the principals? Okay. Now it's the Morgan Show.
Okay, thanks. And I'll try to get us all back on schedule. I did email your reports out before your board meeting this month. If you looked at them closely, it would appear that I'm guessing that we're going to end the year a little bit in the hole. I don't think we are. That's primarily a function of when I go through the budgets, once we start paying people to try to make sure our guesses were accurate. I spend a lot more time on areas that we're going to overspend rather than areas that we're going to underspend. So I know that there's professional development that's not happening. There are field trips that are not happening. There are supplies that are not going to be bought because of the COVID changes that we're all going through. So I don't have any concerns in terms of where we're going to end on the expense side. The one thing that I want to tip you to, and I tipped the SU board to this on Monday, is that we should have received the bulk of our revenue from the state at this point. One piece that I have not seen yet, which is unusual, is the small schools grant that's tied to Bakersfield School. And that was one that, for folks who've been on the board for a while, you'll remember that last year Lynn was pretty aggressive in lobbying our representatives to get that small school grant preserved. Towns that had voluntarily merged were allowed to keep their small schools grants if they had a certain number of students. Berkshire, Bakersfield did not have enough of them. And then Bakersfield missed one of the gates for keeping the small schools grant going forward. So I think it's a glitch at the state, but I've asked them about that and about some supervisory union revenue, and I've not heard anything back from them yet. So that's the one piece that I'm watching. I don't know if there are any questions on this year that I can try to answer.
I'm wondering if we have talked to this board about the transportation revenue and the special ed revenue concerns. Is that something that's familiar to board members?
Certainly,
I know
we've
it
talked to the SU board, but I don't think to
Okay.
this one.
So I'll be really brief on this part. I think some of the revenue that Morgan is talking about is associated with transportation. So the statute in Vermont for transportation state aid is based on the transportation of students to and from school. So there is some question if during this period that we've been using our transportation contract in order to transport food to families, whether or not that will be eligible for the state aid. So what we think may happen is there may be a reduction in the revenue we get from the state, and the state may expect us to use CARES Act money to fill that gap. So we know that the state is going to have to figure out ways to make up that deficit in the education fund, and transportation, that may be one of the ways that the revenue just doesn't come our way. We also have some questions and concerns about special education reimbursement. So our aid for special education is based on services provided, and we get reimbursed for services provided. And during this time, we don't provide services at the same level as we would if we were 100% in school during this time period. So some of the services we pay for through, for example, our local mental health agency, we're not certain that we're going to be getting back the revenue that we typically would. So some of our associated costs might be much higher than what we had anticipated. So that's kind of what Morgan's saying when we're not certain about some of that revenue at the state level.
Lynn sort of already covered the FY21 financial update. There's nothing that I have to add to that. The third thing on my report is going to require a motion, and this is for the tax anticipation note. We tend to get them every year. We have one this year that we haven't had to draw down on at all, and we shouldn't need to now. One of the concerns for next year with the COVID crisis is that we're all wondering if people are going to be able to pay their property tax on the schedule that the town set. And the bulk of your money obviously comes from property tax, and so comes from transfers from the towns. When we ran the numbers to come up with that $2.1 million figure, one of the assumptions that I made was that all the towns who have historically given us tax money in September, October, that they would be in a position where they were not able to do that until the end of December. And so that's why the number has increased from what we had last year. There's been a lot of discussion, I think, in the legislature, certainly around education circles, around the timing of those payments, and the towns are required to turn the money over within a certain number of weeks from when they're due. Whether or not they've raised that money. But the question becomes, if they don't have the money, even if they're required to turn it over, it's not like we're going to be taking the town of Bakersfield to small claims court to get the tax money. So we're putting in a bigger note, basically as a defense against that possibility. We've been fortunate in both our districts to have at least a couple of towns who have been very good about sending that money in as soon as they have it available. But this will give you some protection if that doesn't happen next year.
Morgan, I mentioned that to Jacob, and for folks who don't know this, my husband, who's on the select board in Montgomery, and they talked about this in the Monday webinar on the kind of financial forecasts as well. Some of the I think, and we talked about it at the SU meeting, and he felt as though it might be helpful to kind of clue in select boards to this potential situation, because the Montgomery Select Board, it's not really on their radar. And when I kind of mentioned it to him, he's like, that makes a lot of sense. And just as a courtesy, the school board may want to reach out to the respective select board chairs and just say, hey, you know, you may all, because the towns may also need to kind of work with their lenders if they're, because they're statutorily obligated to pay the district property tax money, whether or not people are paying their property taxes. And so just to kind of head off a massive issue, potentially, we may want to let our select board chairs know that, you know, because people are really struggling. And I suspect we'll see a much higher level of, you know, of non-payment on property taxes this time round.
So let me speak to that if I can. The guidance has already been given to town clerks a week or so ago that they are to reach out to lenders, because exactly what you say, Mary, that people probably are going to have trouble paying their property taxes, but that does not preclude the town from having to pay their share. So town clerks are already aware of this. There's a lot of guidance coming from the Secretary of State's office about this. And there also is some guidance coming that, or I think it's already come, that town clerks can, and select boards can adjust the date that the taxes need to be paid by. So I think town clerks should be talking to their select boards at the current meetings that are happening right now. This is the first week in May. So if not, then yes, we definitely somehow need to let them know that, but they should be getting that information from their town clerks.
I'm happy to reach out as a courtesy to our 6 towns, and I wonder if it makes sense for me to be talking to select board chairs or to the treasurers, and I can do either.
I would say select board chairs.
Okay.
And my suggestion would be to copy the town clerk and the treasurer on it, because the more people that know that this is a concern, the better, in terms of town government, because I've found, especially in our rural towns and now with remote meeting, the word doesn't get around like it did. People may be missing parts of the conversation, and I think the more officials who know about it, the better.
Yep, I can do that.
Okay, so you're looking for a motion, correct?
Yes, and it's in your packet. I can read it to you if you want.
Does somebody want to make the motion?
I can make the motion to approve, authorize the chair to sign away from the table the tax revenue anticipation note and related borrowing resolution and tax certificate for a straight line of credit not to exceed $2.111 million with Community Bank due June 30th, 2021.
Thanks, Mary. By roll call, Aaron?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Emily?
Yes.
Mary?
Yes.
Kat?
Yes.
Lisa?
Yes.
And Miranda, are you still with us, Miranda?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. So brief update on the envelope project at Sheldon Elementary. We did start with 2-person crews. As of this Monday, the the restrictions have been eased a bit on construction in terms of the number of folks. I do not know how many people they have on site now. We're going to meet with them again next Monday. And on May 10th, that restriction gets further increased. So I think that project is going to be picking up a lot of steam in the coming weeks, which is good. We're certainly benefiting from an early start, but we were concerned that an early start and only 2 people on site, if that lasted all summer, would not get us to a point where we were ready to open in August. We have had some additional asbestos testing. The general contractor had some concerns about some pipe insulation. Those tests have come back negative, so that was a bit of good news. And then the last piece, and I expect this is going to get us into executive session and then get us to a motion, is around a clerk of the works position. When we started out the year before everything changed, the plan was that we were going to hopefully hire that facilities person a little bit early in the year, and then when the project started on June 15th, they would basically serve as clerk of the works and be on our payroll. We now are seeing that we're going to have pretty significant work on the project before that, and we just decided to push off indefinitely hiring that facilities manager. So I think we should discuss hiring a clerk of the works. I reached out to 2 that I've worked with in the past successfully in Montgomery, Enosburg, done work for us in Richford, and then did the big project in Berkshire. One of them is completely retired, and the other one is not traveling as far from his Northeast Kingdom base. So neither of them are available. I did a quick reach out to 3 names that I was able to come up with based on recommendations from the architect. And I've got proposals from 2 of them. I've shared those with Emily and with Mary, and we can go into executive at the end of the meeting to discuss those proposals. And then my hope is that give me authority to hire one of them to start as soon as possible. Since we still have a couple of visitors in the meeting, if it's okay with you, Jean Marie, we'll just do that at the very end.
Yep, that seems easiest to me.
Okay. So the last thing on my list is around the copier contract, and I did send information out to you by email directly. We had SBC had 4 companies bidding in the state of Vermont. They also cover New Hampshire and Maine clients, and not all their clients bid everywhere. But I'm told that the bids came in much lower than they were expecting, and I think I showed you what the annual savings would be if we go with the recommendation to contract with SimQuest. SimQuest is the vendor that currently has Berkshire, Bakersfield, and Montgomery contracts. And if you're so inclined, there are 2 motions that I'm going to need to move this forward. And just a heads up on this is that the way we will purchase machines under this is under a municipal lease, which is only available to municipalities, which the 2 school districts are, and the supervisory union is not. So we're going to actually end up piggybacking the supervisory union copier agreements onto the NMV agreement so that we can get those better municipal lease rates. So when you see in the future payments coming through in warrants, they're going to be a little bit higher, and then the SU is going to reimburse NMV for their share of those payments. Erin, it looks like you're now doing a Zoom from inside a tent. Sorry, it's a little distracting.
I was thinking, I'm like, oh, I look like the Blair Witch Trial right now.
So there are two motions I would need if you're so inclined. The first would be a motion to reaffirm the contract with Specialized Purchasing Consultants Corporation, and this is the one that you voted on earlier on in the year.
Anybody want to make that motion?
I can.
Thank you, Emily. And by roll, Aaron,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Emily,
Yes.
Mary,
Yes.
Lisa,
Yes.
Pat,
Yes.
and Miranda.
Yes.
Thank you.
And then the second is a motion to authorize the superintendent to execute and deliver a tax-exempt lease purchase agreement with MST Government Leasing LLC with an aggregate purchase price not exceeding $110,679.95. And so that's the amount that's going to be spread out over 5 years, with the SU taking a portion of that.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Mary. Aaron,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Emily,
Yes.
Mary,
Yes.
Kat,
Yes.
Lisa,
Yes.
and Miranda.
Yes.
Thank you.
And that is all I have, as long as we don't forget to go into executive at the end for the clerk discussion.
Morgan, can I just ask a question back to the budget real quick?
Yep.
Sorry if you already explained this, but the last line item under the NMV portion, the adjustment to prior year, and it's over 500,000. Can you just explain that a little bit?
Yep, I can. So that is for your kids who attended Enosburg and Richford High School in the prior fiscal year. What we do is we pay tuition based on the numbers that the sending schools come up with. And then at the end of the year, we have to submit all of our information to the state, and they calculate what the actual allowable tuition rate is. There's a little bit of a fudge factor in that you can be a little bit off and not bill or not pay money back. But generally each year we either NMV will get a bill if the schools didn't charge enough, or they will end up paying money back, getting money back if the schools charged too much. So that was a big swing primarily on the Enosburg side, because of I think it was a lower number of kids than they had anticipated, so their per pupil costs had gone up. You as a board have the ability to either pay that in this fiscal year or push it off until next fiscal year, because you get that figure after you set their budget. You're not obligated to pay it in that year. So it's something that I generally sit on until we get closer to the end of the year, and if we can pay it, we will pay it, and if we can't, we won't. And so this year we, I think we're seeing savings in general across all line items, but especially in terms of the tuition payments for current year kids. So we've paid the Enosburg High School portion of that bill, and I've got the Richford portion sitting on my desk, and that will go out probably in the next couple of weeks, assuming nothing really bad happens, like we get a message saying you're not getting your small schools grant, and then I may sit on that for next year.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we are at board business. I was looking at our next regular scheduled meeting is June 3rd, and I listened to the governor's press conference today, and we are non-family members of Are we more? Oh, we're more than 10 because like we might even be able to meet in person for our next meeting. Keep your fingers crossed. I'm done with Zoom. Other things under board business, anybody wants to add?
There's something go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to give a quick update on the teacher appreciation, staff appreciation,
Oh,
principal
yes.
appreciation, darn tough order that Erin and I am, with a lot of help from Courtney in the central office, kind of organized. And I'm still trying to, I haven't been entirely ghosted by my contact at Darn Tough, but it's been a little tricky to connect with her the last couple days, but I'm trying her multiple times a day. I hope I don't scare her with my persistence. So hopefully I'll get the order placed in the next day or so, and I'm going to have everything come to me. And then what I was going to do was separate out all the boxes for each of the 4 schools, and thought that then I could drop them with principals if that works, and they could be distributed to teachers and staff from there. So I'll keep everyone posted. I'm just trusting I'm going to get in touch with my woman that's helping me there, and that everything's all right on her end, because she's been really communicative leading up to through the whole process, and then now I can't seem to track her down. So I'll keep you posted.
And if I can, I'd like to add that Courtney has just been amazing, like with constant emails and helping to organize like the orders coming in per school and reaching out to people who maybe didn't fill it out properly. She like has been pivotal. I don't know. I was like, oh, we'll do it. I don't want to put this on your plate. And she's like, oh, I'm okay. And I don't know how I'd have done it. So I just want to sing her praises. She's been amazing. And she came back to us, I think, let's see, it's Wednesday, probably Monday, asking if the Enosburg Richford UUSD could use our idea. And so they stole our idea. So just wanted to kind of let you know that it's kind of a trending idea right now.
We get such great emails back from teachers just expressing how grateful they were about the socks. And I think the best comment that I read was, darn tough socks for a darn tough school year. So I thought that was a great little analogy. Great idea.
I love that.
Yeah. So Jean Marie, I forgot one thing that we talked about at the SU board meeting. I think it would be worthwhile for me to just mention, if you don't mind, to the rest of this board.
Sure, go ahead.
So one of the things we tuned into is the reality of COVID-19 is going to stick around for a while until there's a vaccine. And there was a deadline of December 1st for teachers who were considering retiring for the next school year. And those teachers who have spent enough years in the school, combined with their age, in order to be eligible to retire, they are over 60. So those folks fall into a higher risk category. So we thought that given the increased health risk of the potential for some in-person learning before there is actually a vaccine, the SU board voted on Monday night to extend the deadline for teachers to provide notice to the board for retirement to June 1st. So I'll be communicating that with the teachers. I'm thinking that will go tomorrow. So I just wanted to tip you all to that, because some of you were not a part of that conversation at the SU level.
And can you speak a little bit more to if they choose not to retire but yet still fall in that category? Do you have any idea how we'll handle that situation as a district?
I don't. I actually sent that to Secretary French today. He knows that that's guidance we're going to need in terms of how we're going to respond to folks in some of those higher risk categories and how that will work for in-person learning. But we just thought it would be respectful of our staff. They had to make that decision before this was a current reality, and this will allow them to still make the decision to retire and still be able to get the retirement benefit that they've earned all these years. So. I think
Great.
that's it, right? Morgan's executive.
So you
Yeah,
want a
anything-
motion on that though, right, Lynn?
Do I need a motion from them? I have a motion from the SU board. Do you think I need it from both locals as well?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I was telling you FYI, but thank you, Morgan. So we'll consider a motion.
I can make that motion.
Could you put the motion completely in words again, just so I can process that? Thank you.
Sure. So I wasn't thinking I needed a motion. Let me see if I can do it. So would the board make a motion to extend the notification deadline for teachers eligible for retirement from December 1st to June 1st and allow them full access to the retirement benefits outlined in the master agreement, as long as they notify the board prior to June 1st. Said that twice.
Okay, and Aaron wanted to make that motion. Are you okay with it, Lisa? Okay. Okay, so by roll call, Aaron,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Mary,
Yes.
Emily,
Yes.
Kat,
Yes.
Lisa,
Yes.
and Miranda.
Yes.
Great, thank you
So-
all. Ooh,
That
sorry.
being said, we will not be notifying the teachers about that until next Wednesday because I have one more district board meeting. So on the 13th, I'll notify teachers.
So Lynn, they'll only have a couple of weeks at that point, eh?
Well, maybe I could notify them that it is most likely going to happen and that it'll be finalized on the 13th. Maybe that's what I'll do.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, and now if we don't have anything else, I would entertain a motion to move into executive session.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Mary. By roll, Aaron,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Emily,
Yes.
Mary,
Yes.
Lisa,
Yes.
Kat,
Yes.
and Miranda.
Yes.
Great, thank you. We'll just hang tight while.
Now, and you are out of executive.
Okay. Does somebody want to make a motion regarding our conversation during executive session?
I can try and make that motion.
Okay.
So
You wanna make- Go ahead.
I will try. So give Morgan authorization to negotiate a potential contract with a clerk of the works for the Sheldon envelope project. Is that sufficient?
Yep.
As per
Perfect.
executive session.
As per executive session. Thank you, Mary.
Okay, let's vote by roll. Aaron,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Mary,
Yes.
Emily,
Yes.
Kat,
Yes.
Lisa,
Yes.
and Miranda.
Yes.
Great. I think, does that conclude our work for tonight, folks?
Sure does.
Okay. If there's nothing else, we'll plan to meet again on June 3rd. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Lisa. And all in favor, please signify by leaving the meeting.
Bye.